sir.
So Commissioner Thompson, this is Courtney. Did you get a haircut?
You know what? I did, because unlike Terry, I can't just do whatever I want to and have it look consistently wonderful. I have to do things, you know what I mean?
It looks lovely.
Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you. You know, I was just in the AOC Health and Human Services Committee meeting talking with Pat Allen and Steve Allen about ballot measure 110. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Phew.
And yes, gentlemen, you know, your lovely locks look glorious. Just nicely combed, you look glorious.
I forgot what that was.
You got
And locks look fabulous. Yes. Did you get a haircut?
Okay.
That takes talent. I cut all of my boys' hair and my girls. Gotta save $1 somewhere. Tie in really tight?
It's high and tight. Super tight.
Super tight. You want me to start the recording now?
Yeah, let's go ahead and start. All right, welcome everybody. Work sessions are an opportunity for board members to discuss issues informally with staff and invited guests. The board encourages members of the public to attend work sessions and listen to the discussion, but there's generally no opportunity for public comment. Members of the public wishing to address the board are welcome to do so during the board's regularly scheduled meetings. Can you hear me okay? Okay. First item is to discuss the formal agenda. You've had an opportunity to review the agenda. Does everybody have any questions, comments? Okay. Seeing and hearing none, we'll go ahead and move on to the first topic of the work session, which is the request for lease of Ridge Road right-of-way. It's on page 3 of the agenda. We have 15 minutes to vote on this. And Terry Hendricks, our Assistant Public Works Director, is here, and I'll go ahead and turn it over to Terry.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Commissioners. Recently, Public Works was approached by John Wilson of Raw Properties LLC, who asked if it was possible to lease property along Ridge Road for a commercial venture that they're looking at starting. They went before the commission or the board for the city of Warrenton, their planning meeting, and there were some revisions the city felt needed to be done, but at the same time, they didn't rule it out. The preliminary plan, which is found in your material, shows between 1 to 4 food carts could be on tax log 1102, which is 33 feet wide and 100 feet long. Also provided in your materials is preliminary parallel parking design showing up to 3 to 4 parking spaces, which would intrude into Ridge Road right away approximately 10 feet. The right of way width for Ridge Road at this location, there's an error here. It says 60 feet. It should actually be 80 feet. As seen in the attached photographs, there's an additional 13 feet of space between where the proposed parking spaces would be located and the edge of the asphalt and bike lane. Parking spaces as measured adjacent to Warrenton City Hall are 8.5 feet wide by 24 feet long, or 204 square feet per parking space. 3 spaces require 612 square feet, whereas 4 spaces requires 816 square feet. Well, you will find the existing leases the county has within its right of way. This is something that the board voted on last year, that there would be no commercial ventures within the public right of way without a permit unless or a lease. The KOA lease, which was recently renewed through 2026 at the rate of $5.88 per square foot for building and paved parking area. The Napa Logger lease, which is currently up for renewal, is at $4.10 a square foot for the paved area used for restaurant parking. Public Works is asking the board as to whether or not Raw Properties LLC should be granted a lease for occupying county right-of-way for commercial purposes, and if so, at what rate per square foot? If granting a lease, what other conditions, if any, would you like included in the lease? Take any questions you may have.
Okay, any questions for,
Yes, I have.
okay,
I have some.
Commissioner Webb?
First of all, does the county have some kind of a policy about what the fee it should be for parking, in situations like this? So what has driven, the KOA and Napa Logger leases amount? Is there something that we have come up with, or what?
In doing our research, Commissioner Webb, we find no commonality between the two. The logger lease is just for a parking area only. The building sits within their own lot, whereas the KOA lease has a building and a parking area within, and so that one's at a higher rate. Both of those leases have been in existence for quite some time. And so we have nothing in our record that show how that was previously determined.
Did you say you don't have anything in your records?
We do not.
Okay. Can I ask another question?
Yes, Commissioner Webb.
Yeah, I'm sorry, when you were kind of reading from your report about the right-of-way for Ridge Road at this location is 60 feet. So does that, I'm a little confused there about, so does that mean that it would be reduced to 50 feet if we granted this 10 feet?
If you were to take and look at the photographs at the end of looking north and south, you'll see the right-of-way that they would occupy within the painted lines. The property line is, depending on which one you're looking at, is the one closest to the fence. And the other line would be the parking area that they would potentially use. There's 13 feet of additional space between the westerly line and the existing bike lane through there. And actually the right-of-way, as I said, is in error in the summary. It's 80 feet and not 60 feet. And so it doesn't reduce our right-of-way by anything. We're just leasing that property, or potentially leasing that property, to the property owner.
But I guess my basic question is, what does that leave? How many feet of width does that leave in that, on the road?
It doesn't reduce the road width at all.
Well,
It is road right away that is not currently being utilized, other than just a gravel in between two roads.
okay, so what will be the width of the paved road when this happens?
It's currently 34 feet. There is 24 feet of surface and 5 feet of bike lane or multi-use path on either side, heading north and south up and down Ridge Road. The bike lane sets 13 feet to the west of this area that they would potentially use as parking.
Okay, I'm sorry, I apologize. I always, with things like this, I always go to the site, and I wasn't able to do that in this case, so I was just a little confused. So that leaves us a roadway of 25 feet wide.
No, I think
It
that
leaves us a
13
paved
feet.
road, a paved surface width of 34 feet, 24 feet, which is a travel lane, and 10 feet, 5 feet to bike lane on each side.
So, okay, so it's 24 for automobile vehicles.
That's correct.
Is this striped? Are there stripings on this road?
Pardon me?
Yeah, is this road striped?
Yes, it is. You can see the stripes in the photographs, as well as on the aerial photograph, which is page 1 of the attachment.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, Commissioner Thompson. Commissioner Thompson?
Thank you, sir. We had a letter from a neighbor who had some concerns about safety of vehicles pulling out. Did you see that letter? Could you speak to that and help us?
I have not seen any letters either for or against this proposed leasing of property. I would suggest that should we, the county, decide to lease the property, that it would require that additional 13 feet between that would be paved for the leased parking and the existing bike lane be paved and then striped so that the entrance and exit would be well marked. Because you have a store that resides on the corner of Ridge Road and Pacific Drive that gets quite a bit of traffic.
So you'd be comfortable with vehicular and pedestrian safety if we allowed this lease? Is that accurate?
It is accurate. There's not that much foot traffic. There is some bicycle traffic because the Fort Stevens and KOA is down the road about a half mile. And so I'm sure there is a number of bicycle traffic that rides down to the marina.
Thank you. Commissioner Aquila, is this your neighborhood?
It is, yeah, it's not far from my neighborhood, and Carolyn Shepard is the one that submitted the public comment. She lives right next door to where this activity was being placed. I think she said she doesn't oppose the parking arrangement, but worry if people were to park in front of her property in order to access the food carts, that it might cause visibility issues for people trying to come in and out of her driveway. And so she asked that if it's approved, that a no parking sign or something similar be put in front of her, or put up in between 7th and 8th Street, so it's clear that parking is only allowed between 7th and Pacific Drive. So that was her comment, to make sure that the parking was clearly delineated and that there was some signage that would prohibit people from parking directly in front of her house.
Well, maybe you could answer my question then about, because she gave, in her correspondence with us, she gave her address as Lake Drive, but then she talked about 7th and 8th.
Yeah, Lake is the perpendicular street.
See that? I didn't understand, but 7th and 8th is over here.
Lake Drive is the original given name on the plat, the original plat, which was done in the late 1890s for what we call Ridge Road. It may be signed as Lake north of Pacific Drive, where it's no longer a county road, and then it's Ridge Road south of Pacific Drive.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner Banks?
Yeah, so I'm not against this per se, but I would like to honor her request of a no parking sign and whatnot, just because, you know, I don't want to get into a situation where people are using her property or her area for parking. And just to be clear, they are not going to be selling anything on the actual right-of-way. It's just for parking. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. And is this within Warrenton municipality, or is this right outside of it?
No, this is
No,
in-
it
this is
falls
in
within the
Warrenton.
city of Warrenton.
In what?
Yeah, and so, has city council been participating in the conversation with this food truck court idea?
They're aware of it. The diagram that shows up as the attachment for the second page, that it was put in by their engineer and then given to me for this presentation. This is the same thing that he presented to them, and they needed to have further discussion about it. They
Okay.
have neither
I feel
given
like
the
our
plan the
decision is
okay or
sure.
not.
Okay.
Okay, Commissioner Toyoka?
Yeah, just a question of clarification. So we had another issue about right-of-way here, just, meters away. And we, it was determined no commercial activity within that right-of-way. And I know we're discussing parking. Well, to do business, you have to have parking. Where do we delineate that? Because that's part of business. Parking is part of doing business. For consistency's sake, I want to make sure we're clear on that. If you're required to have parking to do business, is that consistent with previous decisions?
Well, what was decided by the board previously was that there would be no commercial ventures within the public right of way unless it was permitted and there was a lease secured. As we already had the KOA and the Logger Restaurant, their parking as well. So, whether the city of Warrenton would end up allowing this because of the food trucks, that's on their end. They asked our board, to take a look and see if they would be willing to lease 10 feet of property along that frontage along tax lot 1102 that would accommodate 4 parking spaces for their potential food truck trade.
Yeah, Commissioner Webb.
I agree with Commissioner Bangs. I think this might be a little premature. Because if they've been to the planning commission, first of all, your report says they had a pre-app meeting. Pre-app meetings aren't usually with planning commissions, they're usually with the staff. So I don't know, maybe Warrenton does that, but, if we approve this, would it be kind of speculative as to, depending on what the city, obviously, we have to honor, what the city says. The process just looks.
I've got a feeling that since we had this lengthy discussion last year, I think it was last year, that they're probably trying to get the pulse of our commission to see if it's favorable to it and then bring it back. They don't want to go down that road if we're not going to be able to. And frankly, this to me is a little different situation than the other one, and it seems to be far enough removed from the traffic lanes that you're not going to have that interface. The other site did. That was a public safety hazard where you're actually pulling in and not pulling all the way off of the street. So it seems like this might be a little different situation. I'd be open to it, just living there and understanding kind of what the dynamic is in that area, that this might be something that
Because all we'd be doing is kind of an advisory.
yeah, and it's farther enough off of the roadway, so you're still have plenty of room for bike lane and then 13 feet. But I like the suggestion of our assistant director with regards to having them pave and stripe it and clearly delineate where that is. Commissioner Banks.
I guess with the conversation of paving and striping, who would be footing that bill? Would it be the county footing that bill and not the business that is wishing to open? I don't know. I guess I don't know where we draw the line on what we pay for and what a prospective business pays for in regards to that. I'm amiable to this because we've already created with the KOA and with the logger what is deemed acceptable is parking. And so we've got a very long history of that. But I just want to be clear, like, are they also asking, like, who's going to be funding this situation, and what happens if they say close? What do we do, I guess? So I guess before we approve it, I would like a cost analysis and also a potential agreement of investment, maybe, from the person that's going to be profiting from our help, I guess. This is my thought.
And if I would say, Chair Quilla, members of the board, that I don't know if Terry wants to talk about that portion of who would be absorbing the cost if there was the requirement for paving. I don't know if you've had thoughts about that, Terry.
I would make it part of the lease agreement that whether or not this works out, comes to fruition for them, that prior to starting to use the parking area, that it would have to be paved as per the board's direction and striped. And that would be on them whether or not it, before they could ever use it. That way there's no burden on the county, and it's not a problem if they were to take and pave it and stripe it, and 2 years down the road, either they don't do enough business and it goes away. We're not harmed either way.
I happen to agree with that. Commissioner Thompson?
And I agree as well. For me, this is very different than the last case we had. The activity is taking place at the food carts and the picnic tables. Those are well removed from the right of way. I see this as permissive on the county's part and supporting good economic development in Warrenton if we take the neighbor's concern into account. So I like the idea that we're going to ask that also the person who's doing the leasing establishes that sign. I don't know if that's possible, but if we can, we can share those costs with them, that's good. They pay for it, we allow it, the city of Warrenton benefits, and everybody's happy. That's what I'm hoping for. And Chair Quilla, it's your neighborhood. I'm a firm believer that commissioners have a pretty clear sense of what the pulse of their own neighborhood is. So I would defer to you in that.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Commissioner Thompson. I agree with what you just said, and I do think this could be a benefit to that area. The one question that's left, I think, is the lease per square foot lease that we would want to establish for this. And I see the KOA, which is in closest proximity to this, was a recent lease, July 2021 through 26, and it's the $588 per square foot. Would there be any reason to deviate from that in establishing this?
Chair Quilla, members of the board, what I might suggest is that let us go back, if you're amenable to a potential lease, and we will go back and do a little bit more research on what a commensurate cost would be for that, and then make a recommendation to your board if we get that far. I think, as it was stated earlier, this is really contingent ultimately upon approval from the city. I think what they just want to know is, would the county be supportive if they get approval? And it sounds like the answer is yes, but there will be details. It'll be part of the lease, and part of the detail will be the improvements, and the other part will be the actual lease amount.
Yeah.
And then we will negotiate with that and then bring that back to your board.
Commissioner Toyoka?
Just on parking issue. It's probably a city of Warrenton issue for their permit, but, you know, it seems like it should be addressed for overflow, because if it's proposed 5 food trucks, I don't know if any of you have been around those, but I think the 4 slots or there, as depicted in front of them, is woefully inadequate, so I think they but, you know, there's adjacent parking available, so it would not be a safety issue. Probably city warrants.
Yeah, Commissioner, I think you're right. The city of Warrenton will, I assume, be looking at all those factors as part of their approval. I think when it comes to signage, we will have to work with the city also.
Any other questions or comments on this item? Okay, well, thank you, Terry. Appreciate the presentation.
Thank you very much for your time.
We'll move on to our next item, which is the fiscal year 2021-22 fourth quarter financials. And Jennifer Carlson, our finance and budget manager, is here, so I'll turn it over to Jennifer.
Hello. My first in-person presentation with the commissioner.
All right.
This might be interesting. All right, so we're looking at the quarter 4 financials for the year ending 21-22. Oh, I got this. So I decided also with what was in the board packet is all the nitty-gritty, and I know when we've looked at it on the screen before, you got to zoom in, it's hard to read, so I thought I would just put some highlights in a presentation. If you have any questions about what's in the board packet, please bring that to my attention as well. But we'll just run through this real quick, and please ask questions as I go. For the general fund, some financial highlights. The resources within the 21-22 budget as of today, which changed a little bit from when I prepared that, we received 101.1% of budgeted revenues. This is consistent within prior years. We typically receive more than 100% of what we budgeted because we budget conservatively. As for the expenditures, we expended 87% of the budgeted, and that is also consistent with prior years, as we never expend over the entire budget. And then the general fund actual ending fund balance is $10.6 million, or 41% of the actual operating expenditures. Please note that that's an unaudited number.
I may have said this before, commissioners, I'm sorry if I repeat myself, but, you know, local governments, especially specifically counties, and we don't spend all the appropriations. You know, that's different than the federal government and state governments that will obviously get an appropriation and they will try to spend their entire appropriation. What we assume is that we aren't going to spend it all because we have vacancies, we have just things that don't happen as was planned. And so, you know, that part, that 87% expenditure rate then helps feed the fund balance requirements for the county. And so we will continue to not spend 100%. I mean, the whole strategy is to fall within this ballpark so that we have a healthy fund balance that then gives us the flexibility to address volatility with other revenues, volatility with expenditures, pandemics, all those kinds of things. Thank you.
Now it's working? Okay, so for the general fund resources, the total revenues received in the general fund were $24.2 million. Of that, $10.4 million was from property taxes, $4.9 was from intergovernmental state revenues, and of that 4.9, 3.7 is timber revenue. 3.2 was from intergovernmental other revenues, and 2.8 of that is rural law enforcement district portion that they pay for Sheriff Enforcement Division. And then for the license and permit revenues, we received $2 million, of which $1.8 million is from room taxes. And there's a little breakout of where those room we received $830,000 under discretionary, $290,000 under tourism, $90,000 for public road and drainage improvements, and $620,000 for expenditures, total expenditures were $25.7 million, or 87% of the budgeted expenditure. In prior year in trends, the county typically expends anywhere from 85 to 95%. Thorough look at the last 10 years, and it ranged right in that. The 21-22 budgeted ending fund balance was 22% of the operating expenditures, so that's what we approved, adopted in our budget. And then when we look at our actual numbers, since we did not expend our entire budget and we received more revenues than we, our ending fund balance came in much higher at 41. And then I don't have much on all the other funds. Everything was as anticipated. I did make a couple notes about some grants that will be carried over into the next fiscal year, but nothing notable to point out. Any questions?
So if I can, sorry, Patrick, we're the members of the board, just want to go back to a conversation that was had at the budget committee meeting when we were talking about fund balance, and, you know, we have the goal of being at 25%, kind of the minimum is really 20. And at the time, you know, we had a discussion that that's the budgeted number, but that's not what was really going to happen. So what you see is that we ended up at 40% fund balance reserve. So we are above what that fund balance goal is. And you know, there is an art for that fund balance management, and it's never going to be calibrated perfectly because of all these different factors. But as we go into the discussion for next year's budget, which we're going to kick off sooner this year, and there'll be a memo coming out from Jennifer laying out what that process will be, and we'll probably kickstart that in September, so we'll start it a lot sooner. But one of the conversations is then looking at that fund balance, and under different scenarios, which includes timber reductions, potentially TLT reductions, what impacts would those have on our fund balance numbers over a 5-year period, just so we can give the board and the budget committee different scenarios about what our financial position would be given certain events that may happen on the revenue side, and then we can also look at what our assumptions are on the expenditure side. And so that way you'll be able to see a little bit better, how does that fund balance actually create stability, or what are the risks as we go forward. So there'll be much more conversation about that starting in September.
That just answered all my questions. How are we gonna communicate this to the budget committee? So, Commissioner Webb?
Yeah, I have a question about where are our ARPA funds, how they relate. I didn't see anything here.
Yeah, so if you look in
What
the
am I missing?
actual, what was in the board packet, ARPA funds are received in Fund 090, so that would have been on page 18 of your board packet.
Again? No, I'm on page 18. What am I looking at?
So if you look down at the funds, 090 COVID funds, that the ARPA organizational unit is within that fund. And so you can see this year we received the 3.9. Last year we received the other portion.
Oh, so that COVID and, I didn't understand that. I assumed those were health.
Oh, yes,
That's.
Fund 090 includes the ARPA organizational unit within that fund. Yes, my apologies.
And there's also information on the county website about our ARPA funding. It has the conceptual funding plan, and then it has the expenditures.
Right, I just didn't see it in here. And maybe can I ask another question that relates to, I was on a couple of hour webinar this morning that the White House sponsored about the fact that the Treasury Department has taken another look ahead in the funding, and they've changed a number of the regulations, et cetera, about, so is somebody in the staff monitoring that?
Yes, we are, Commissioner.
Okay. Thank you. It was quite cool because going for housing.
Yes. Yeah, housing was one of the changes that they just made, yes.
Commissioner Bangs.
Yeah, so I appreciate this, more than anything, just the deeper dive, I guess, moving into next year's, fiscal discussion. Knowing that in November, we're going to have, some answers regarding our timber dollars and what will be occurring, for us there. And so, if things go along the timeline that has been projected, we should know by November, and so we can start planning, so.
And I think all the scenario planning will hopefully get the board and the budget committee comfortable about the navigation that we're gonna have to do, if we have reduced timber revenues. And I think the good news is that there is flexibility, but within flexibility, there is gonna be decisions that have to be made. And so, I mean, our goal is obviously to make the organization sustainable over time. And that's a gift that we give certainly to our residents, but we also give it to our staff and our stakeholders. So we are cognizant of all those different factors.
Any other questions, comments? Commissioner Webb?
I don't know why, but after 4 years of quarterly budget reports, this one I just really liked. I liked the way, I thought it was, there wasn't too much of it, you know, there weren't 18 pages of it. And it was very clear, other than the mistake that I made about what COVID meant. But I really appreciated it. I think in terms of quarterly reports, this for me was a really nice format.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Thank you,
Always nice
Jennifer.
to be under budget anyway, so, yeah.
Well, and the news was
With very good news associated with it.
That helps.
Yes. Thank
Except-
you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Except we have to be careful about
Certainly, we certainly do. So we don't have any other items on our work session. We've got about 25 minutes before our regular meeting. So we'll take a little break. Okay, we're ready to go here. Call this meeting to order. Sorry about that. The Board of Commissioners, as the governing body of Clatsop County, all county service districts for which this body so acts, is now meeting in regular session. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Good God. With liberty and justice for all.
All right, Clerk of the Board, do we have the roll call?
Chair Quila,
Here?
Vice Chair Thompson,
I'm here.
Commissioner Toyoka,
Here.
Commissioner Webb,
Here.
Commissioner Banks. Here.
Thank you, Teresa. We had an opportunity to review the agenda at our work session. Any questions or comments? Are we ready for a motion?
Mr. Chair, Vice Chair Thompson would move to adopt the agenda as presented.
Moved and seconded to approve the agenda. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. Business from the public. This is an opportunity for anyone to give a 2-minute presentation about any item on the agenda, except for public hearings or any topic of county concern that is not on the agenda. Clerk of the Board, is there any member of the public that has registered to speak?
No, there's not.
We'll go ahead then and move on to the consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar? Any questions or comments in advance? Okay, we'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
Move to adopt the consent calendar.
It's moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, motion carries. We'll move on to the Commissioner Liaison reports. Vice Chair Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just came fresh from a meeting of the Association of Oregon Counties Health and Human Services Committee. And we had presenting to us today Patrick Allen and Steve Allen from the Oregon Health Authority. There was a robust discussion of the unintended consequences and the intended consequences of ballot measure 110. They pointed out to us that Pat Allen did that he was bound to observe the intention of that ballot measure, which was the decriminalization, which was moving money into treatment, which was to have a completely new system of treatment to address those who had been previously criminalized, and to have oversight and accountability, the Oversight and Accountability Council formed, empowering those who had been previously disempowered. I appreciated all of that and gave them the feedback from Clatsop County that there was great consternation here on the unintended consequences of ballot measure 110 that was echoed by the chair, who's from Portland. They talked about how hard they'd been working. I appreciated their hard work and said that I was afraid there would be a considerable backlash. So they heard us, they appreciated the appreciation. They did point out that that there are a variety of issues that they're scrambling to deal with to fund and implement the ballot measure 110. They are also looking at relationships and trust building. They are looking at the use of drug courts. They are looking at fortifying communities. So what they're looking for is better health care, better health, better care, and lower costs. All of that notwithstanding, I think it behooves us to stay in conversation about that. But I think our position was clear. Our sheriff has told us, we see it all around us, we hear it every day, and those need to be addressed. So I think we're heard in that regard. And number two, I assume that my colleagues have heard that LUBA rejected the Lincoln County referendum. And so I think think it's time to do a reboot in Clatsop County, and I'd like us to discuss that at some point. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's my report.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Thompson. Commissioner Banks.
I'd like to Clatsop County Fair. I spent the whole week participating with my children and volunteering, and I will have to say that the cards were definitely stacked against that fair board going into the fair, with some staffing turnover and just a really low level of volunteers available. For the concert, they had 2 of the 12 paid positions actually show up. And so they had to fill positions with student volunteers, 4-H volunteers, and other folks. And I just have to say, with everything that they had kind of working against them, the lack of a carnival that some figured that they might miss, I feel like they pulled off something very amazing for our kids in this community and for the families. There were so many fun activities. A highlight for my children was the Tongue Point booth, where the kids from Tongue Point, and they're not kids, they're young adults, I apologize, they came and they were doing they were building birdhouses, they were painting with students, they were just doing all kinds of exciting, fun activities. They did little terrarium gardens with the kids, and so everything was new every day. There was a different activity, and there were just so many wonderful free activities for kids this year. Miniature golf and the corn pit, which is an old favorite. But overall, I think that it was a wonderful fair. The kids, I forgot to look at my phone at the number, but I know it was over $600,000 at auction for their 4-H and FFA market animals. And, you know, the dynamics of the barn were a little different. You know, we had more steers than we'd had in past years and fewer pigs. But there were so many smiles, and the kids came away successful. I feel like the barns looked amazing. I feel like everybody kind of within the barn area and the 4-H area tried really hard to make sure that the fair was just as good as it has been in past years. And I saw a number of volunteers chip in. They were not, they would just take out trash. And it was just nice to see a community come together post-COVID and have a successful fair. And then I wanted to extend some thanks to all of the businesses that participated, not only in sponsoring. I know CMH and LUMS were part of that also, but they also showed up for auction for those kids. And that is amazing. And the list of businesses is long. I have my colleagues sitting next to me, so they're, you know, up top in my head here. But I was just, it was a good week. It was a really good week. It was kind of healing to the soul for I think, a number of families post-COVID. Moving on, I got appointed, I guess, to vice chair for the Northwest Senior and Disability Services. So if I continue that liaison here in the next year, that'll be my new duties with them. And then I have an so many acronyms, I apologize, FTALC meeting coming up this Friday in Salem, and it'll be my first one that'll be in person. So I'm actually really looking forward to that. I know that Zoom is easy to dissociate yourself from sometimes the conversation, so I'm hoping in person will really help me plead our case in front of the Oregon Department of Forestry in regards to the future of our county. So that's it for now.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Banks. And I echo your compliments to everyone with the fair. The Quila family had a great time out there a couple of days. Commissioner Webb.
Yes, I am also fresh from a meeting today with the new director of USDA's Rural Development Office for the state of Oregon. And I met with her along with Alyssa Gertler, who is the new NOHA executive director, who I want to bring to one of our next meetings to introduce her to you all. We started off talking about USDA programs for rural areas, and I had been led to believe that the primary conversation was going to be about housing. But I learned that USDA has what did she tell me? They have something like 70 different programs. And that a rural area basically is constituted by all of Clatsop County. Before she met with us, she had actually met with the city of Portland and the city of Warrenton as well. So I think there's a lot more USDA money out there than I was personally aware, or that our housing authority was. We actually do have one of our housing authority properties, which is in Nehalem, was funded by USDA. So it really stimulated a lot of interest on our part about how many of their programs that we maybe need to be familiarizing ourselves with and evaluating the possibilities for funding here. So that was pretty wonderful. I think it has been, I can't remember whether this was at our last meeting or not, but the elevator at Owens Adair is fixed, hallelujah. And we got our funding, we got our light pick funding from the state, which was, we were not really convinced we were going to get it in this first round, but we got it. So things will be moving, we hope, relatively quickly in terms of going to the city and beginning the permitting process. The feasibility study that we got, we were really pleased with in terms of the funding, because it means that we're going to be able to build a brand-new building on the present site of Owens Adair, and it's going to include parking, and we're also going to be able to move our present tenants, who number more than 50, into that new building as we improve and restore the older building. And it's going to mean that we're going to have probably another 50 units to be able to put on the market, not on the market, but to be able to qualify older and disabled people to live in. So that's going to that, and our affordable housing project in Trillium, which is moving right along. And I would encourage anyone to go take a look at it. It's really an incredible facility. It's going to have, one of the things I liked about the developers is that they responded to our need to leave enough land to have maybe a garden and definitely a playground, because we have multi-bedroom units there, and we're hoping to be able to put families. So things are moving along very, very well with the Housing Authority.
Thank you, Commissioner Webb. Exciting news. Commissioner Toyoka?
Thank you. Fair, yeah, 4-H kids at the fair are amazing. Big kids, because I'm old, and they're not, but just their attitudes, their aspirations, how they communicate with you. It's a great program 4-H has going on, and I just, it contributes so much to their development. And I know, talking to some of the kids, the challenges of what they had the last few years, not being able to do that, you see the mental change and the joy they had. It was really incredible. And fortunately, they're so nice, we bought way too many animals. But really support them, and just what they're doing with those fair proceeds from those animals is pretty neat. It's not like I'm going to buy this or that. It's more development of their growth, which is really neat. The only, I guess, negative about the fair is not the 4-H, but the fair grounds and the fair board. The lack of, it kind of made some glaring issues pop out this year. I was personally very unhappy with a few situations, but I think it's things that need to be worked out were highlighted all in one event. So that was probably the benefit, that a lot of these things came out, so at least address that and move forward. Another thing is, I was officially appointed on the NACO Veterans and Military Services Committee last week.
Yay.
So I'm officially there as a member of that committee. Hope to bring back, I've had one meeting, and the next one's coming up in a few weeks, but great issues that we can actually translate to our county and hold the Veteran Services Officer here, and hopefully we can do some good things. A lot of resources I didn't know about, I'm sure our Veteran Service Officer knows about, but having someone else with that knowledge, and then communication, it was interesting, we calls, letters, emails, texts all the time. I mean, a litany of them. I had a great call. She was upset about the short-term rental, wanted to talk. 5 minutes, we ended up talking a half hour. The neat thing was great discussion on short-term rental. The gentleman is a Microsoft senior engineer. We actually started talking more about communication. And he gave us some great insights about, maybe things that we can implement here at the county to, increase our level of communication with the public, within ourselves. There's a lot of new technology out there. So I just said, there's a great resource that, maybe we can just start a discussion and open it up. And the old days of public notices in the newspaper, I think, is probably, I haven't even seen a newspaper for probably, I read everything electronically. Same news source, but I don't physically open the paper. You device and you read the same. I think that's the way we're going. He had insights on how to do that with the rest of, how to get our message out, communication out better. So it was very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the report, Commissioner Tooka, and congratulations on your new position. That's fantastic. I would like to thank our staff and our county emergency manager, Tiffany Brown, and Betsy Emery with Senator Jeff Merkley's office, and then our Commissioner Webb and Commissioner Thompson also were in attendance, a meeting about emergency preparedness and the state of emergency preparedness in Clatsop County, along with a number of emergency managers and first responders in the area. I hope it's the first of many discussions. But I do appreciate their interest in it, and hopefully as we move forward in the legislative session that we'll get some needed attention to some of these areas we're deficient. And I'm glad that Commissioner Webb brought up levees and tide gates being one of those areas, and I hope that that'll be something that's on top of mind when we move forward on these.
Apparently, a new regulation coming out of Treasury.
Fantastic. That's great news. Yeah. And I'll turn it over to our county manager.
Oh, Commissioner Thompson, did you want to call on her, or did she already report?
Oh, she reported.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
County manager?
Chair, members of the board, thank you. I also had the opportunity to meet with Alyssa Gertler this afternoon, and very excited about future partnership opportunities between NOAA and the county. We come from some of the same circles in my previous job, so it's nice to catch up. The other is that it was mentioned about the Luba case down in Lincoln County, and if there's no objections from your board, I'd like to add an agenda item for next work session to have Joanna and Chris Crean be available to your board to get a overview of the case and their assessment of how it may or may not coincide with some of the issues and challenges here. And then I think that will lead to a conversation about next steps with the STR discussion. So if no objections, we'll have an agenda item added, and there will be an executive session that same day, so we'll put it in before the
Sounds
executive
good. Yeah.
session.
Do
So
you need a motion, or?
no, it's fine. As long as
we
your
got
board's
consensus,
okay.
yeah, sounds good.
And that's all that I have for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, County Manager. Okay, we'll move on to our public hearing this evening. It's in our agenda on page 36, ordinance declaring a temporary ban on psilocybin businesses, and this is the second reading. I'll go ahead and turn it over to our county counsel, Joanna, for the staff report.
Thank you, Chair Quayla and members of the board. My name is Joanna Lyons-Antley, County Counsel. And today we're going to talk about, this is the second reading for the ordinance to adopt a 2-year moratorium to allow the county to review the OHA regulations and to adopt reasonable time, place, and manner regulations. We've talked about this quite a bit, so I'm just going to jump to the options that your board has the choice to do. So as you can see on our screen, the first option, of course, is to do nothing. We are bound by the ballot measure and the options given to us by that ballot measure. So, of course, option 1, we can do nothing. Option 2 is to adopt an ordinance to prohibit, and that, of course, would be the unincorporated areas only. This would be a countywide election, however, but it would be in the areas outside of cities. It would be referred to the voters in the November 2022 election. The third option is to adopt a 2-year moratorium, and that would allow, like I said from the beginning, the county to adopt some regulations, time, place, and manner regulations. It would allow also staff to review the OHA regulations, which we expect will be final shortly before applications are accepted in January 2023. One question that was raised was, do we actually have to refer this to a vote? And yes, the ballot measure does require any prohibition, even if it's for a shorter period of time than permanent, would require us to refer this to the voters in the next election. So just to give you some assurance that this is a necessary process. And then, of course, option 4 is to adopt time, place, and manner regulations. Of these options, local government, cities have the same set of options, and so therefore staff is recommending option 3, and then of course this is the second reading of this proposed ordinance. Again, we do not know what counties will ultimately decide to do, or excuse me, cities within the county will ultimately decide to do, and there's still some uncertainty about what those regulations will look like from OHA. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Any questions for County Counsel? Commissioner Webb?
Yeah, I still have a question about what is it that we are sending to the voters in November?
Chair Quayla and members of the board, that would be about a ballot title asking the voters to adopt a 2-year moratorium.
So we're
if you choose to move forward.
Confirm our decision.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
And Commissioner Banks?
So I'm just curious. It says a lot about the Oregon Health Authority and not involved in rulemaking and initiating rulemaking and the time frame of which it'll be finalized. But in regards to growing and the agriculture side, which is more than likely going to happen in our unincorporated area, I don't hear anything mentioned about that. Land use regulations, is this like, so is there any discussion through the Department of Agriculture, or is this all driven by the Oregon Health Authority? Chair Quayla, members of the board, I understand it's driven through Oregon Health Authority. And so, again, we will be waiting to see if there's any regulations and what those regulations will look like.
Okay. Commissioner Toyoka?
Yeah. I think, this whole Measure 109 thing has got so many holes in it. I think it was passed in Oregon because of the title of the measure. As they pushed it through, it made it sound, rainbows and unicorns. Read the actual, they didn't have a plan. So it's very loose at this point. I think, like Commissioner Bang states, there's a lot of the growing and production, and none of those issues are look at, I did some more research, and even the American Psychiatric Association and Oregon Psychiatric Physician Association both oppose, because what's touted as, the OHA is like, we're gonna cure these or treat these symptoms. Both of these professional organizations say it's not proven, it's not true. You know, we're on a false premise to begin with. Number two, we don't have all of the issues addressed, from manufacture to refinement to distribution. The other part is on the, and it's, you know, there's the training requirements, or, you know, who can distribute. But there's no diagnosis required. Anyone could walk in, see that. So in essence, the way it sits and the way I read it, you know, sorry for the crass summary, but it looks like a recreational pharmaceutical facility. Don't even address the medical side when you're looking. So, you know, I looked at one of our options was to ban it. Is that up as a ban or a 2-year? Stronger message would be to ban it. Let's make sure they get their ducks in a row before they bring it to the voters, bring it to our county. A lot of hazard here.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Toyoka. Is it question or
It's a
discussion?
question. It's a
Okay,
question.
go ahead.
So in option, I'm not even looking at the options, I apologize. In the moratorium option, is it possible to add production? Or is it all encompassing when because it obviously has to go to the voters. So in either the banning or the moratorium option, can we address growing just until, like, we can get a grip on rules, regulations, water use, so on and so forth. So I don't know, is that possible?
Chair Cuela and members of the board, yes, that is included in the proposed moratorium. It's that manufacturer portion, and that includes the growing of the psilocybin.
Section 1. Yep. Yeah. Thank you, County Council. We don't have any other questions at this time. I'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Clerk of the board, are there any members of the public who have registered to speak?
No, there are not.
Okay. Is there anyone that's joined us virtually or in the room that would like to speak on this matter? Okay, not seeing anybody. We'll go ahead and close the public hearing at this time. Are there any items additional to discuss? Any discussion from the commission?
It's a question slash.
Yeah, Commissioner Banks.
Yeah, it's a question slash discussion. So in the moratorium, say we get, 6 months in and we find out what OHA has decided and what potentially the Oregon Department of Agriculture gets involved in. So are we able to, say, next election cycle to put and change from a moratorium? Say we are at a point where we want to ban it, where it just looks like the issues are going to be more than our county can facilitate. I mean, I worry about the fact that this is all an incorporated area, and so if something happens, it's on the burden of our sheriff's department to respond, and they're already stretched thin, and we're looking at potential budget cuts on that side. So I guess my question is as we get into next year, if we choose a moratorium and the voters go for it, can we then put on the ballot come next November a potential ban if it looks like this is not something that Clatsop County has the capabilities of handling? I know our municipalities can do different choices, which is great. I'm just trying to, it's really hard to foresight something like this. So just curious.
Chair Cuela and members of the board, this was a question that I had in my mind as well. I was trying to find the statute really quickly, which thank you for giving me a little bit of time. It is actually, the statute requires it to be held at the next general election, which would be this November. So unless there was a change in the statute, which I would say the Oregon legislature could change that statute, at this time it looks like it would be, your one shot is in November of 2022.
Let's go ahead and Commissioner Toyoka and then Commissioner Webb. Commissioner Toyoka.
County Council, a question again on the wording when you word these things for the ballot. you address the facts, like, you know, like this, they haven't had phase 3 trials, it's not FDA approved, they don't know how it reacts to medication, other medications, that it's been disapproved of by medical professionals. I mean, how do you get the other side of the story so people have more facts instead of just it's, you know, we're going to treat mental illness and we do, but, you know, a lot of the professionals say it may not either. We get the correct wording out there.
Chair Quayla and members of the board, this ordinance is just to refer the matter to the ballot. Our next agenda item, which I think it will be the public one, will actually talk about the ballot title itself. That is not something that has to be adopted. I'm getting a little ahead of the agenda item, but at that time, when we get to that agenda item, maybe we can talk a little bit more about the wording and the purpose of what the ballot title is, if that is helpful.
Okay. Commissioner Webb?
I'm sorry, I guess there's something basic that I'm not understanding. I'll hold my comments for next.
Okay. All right. Commissioner Banks?
So I'm curious, say we go for the moratorium and we refer it to the voters and then it is voted down. And so does that mean come January, we need to be ready for time, place, and all of the things?
Chair Quayla and members of the board, yes, we would be on an accelerated path to adopt time, place, and manner regulations.
Could we, similar to the short-term rental moratorium, pull another moratorium out of the hat? I don't know. So I'm looking at this saying OHA is going to be done with their rulemaking in December, right before a holiday for our county staff, for basically everyone in the nation. And then we're expected to flip and reverse and come out in January ready to issue permits to folks to grow, build, and distribute. I feel like that's just like nauseatingly fast is my, so I'm just trying to get a grip on what this might look like for the county.
Chair Quayla and members of the board, I think you have accurately described the challenges that staff would have to address time, place, and manner regulations.
And hence the justification for doing the moratorium.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, if I could, Chair Quayla, I think the moratorium really is to allow us to have the type of public, you know, diligent public policy process that we desire, so that we can actually create the time, place, and manner regulations that are informed and that staff can actually plug into their work plan. And so the moratorium really is to allow the state to do their work, but then allow the county to do their work. But we feel the county would best do its work being informed by what the cities are also doing, because, you know, the boundaries are pretty nebulous when it comes to these facilities. And so I think that between the cities and the counties, there'll be discussions about what those time, place, and manner regulations might be, so that we can do it in a really cogent, coordinated way. Doesn't mean that we can always agree to all those, but I think that that's what the goal is. So I think it's going to take some time just for those to happen. So there is a risk, as was noted, that if the moratorium is placed on the ballot and does not pass, you know, we will be, you know, trying to get something done at the last minute, and chances of it being done by the time the state takes applications are not great for all those reasons that were just mentioned. But staff would have to try to put something together quickly. And I just generally think that's not the best process for public policy. We usually do best if we have time to reflect.
Thank you, County Manager. Commissioner Banks?
So I'm going to speak to the ban versus, the all-out ban versus the moratorium. So in the previous meeting, it was stated that our Clatsop County voters passed it here. And so my personal feeling is it is not my place to try to overturn that when they've already spoken. But what my position is now is, you know, granted, I disagree with it just in general. But again, it's not, I don't feel it's my place to try to circumvent the process that they've already voted for. What my goal now moving forward is to make sure we give staff as much time as possible in order to enact a time, place, and manner that is the most feasible for our unincorporated area. Those are just my personal thoughts. As much as I dislike this topic and as much as I feel like the 100 and some odd hours and the 40 hours is just not enough education in order to do something like this, our voters have spoken. Back when this was adopted at the state level, and had our voters had a different, I think, a different voice, I would be able to have a different conversation. So I have to take this less as a personal choice and more as I have to support the majority of our voters.
Thank you, Commissioner Bangs. Chair recognizes Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Banks, thank you for those comments. I agree, the voters have spoken. I think asking for a moratorium makes sense. We'll listen to the voters, and whatever they say to do, we'll do our best to implement that. I assume that if our voters don't want a moratorium, that our staff is resilient and will reach out to their colleagues in other parts of the state and will cobble something together. We will be dealing with the consequences one way or the other, but like you, I want to stick with the will of the voters. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. Commissioner Toyoka.
One question for, I guess, county manager and county council. Have you talked, if any discussions with the cities within our county, any of what they're trying to do, or?
Commissioner Toyoka, members of the board, we have reached out to all of our cities, and we've had conversations just generally about what their direction is right now, because we're all in the same decision point because of the timelines to actually put something on the ballot. And so, but nobody has gotten to the point where they have time, place, and manner drafts or anything else. And the main reason is because we're all still waiting for the information and the detail. And so I think that, you know, over the coming months, we will get a little bit more insight into what direction some may be going. But again, I just think that generally speaking, the more information leads to the better public policy. And so, so there's conversations, but to my knowledge, no city has a draft of the time, place, and manner ordinance. Again, still waiting for the state to finish their work.
Okay. Thank you, County Manager. Did you have a follow-up? No. Commissioner Banks?
Are we ready for a motion?
Yep.
Okay.
Call for motion.
I move to adopt resolution and order referring to the voters of Clatsop County a measure proposing a temporary ban on psilocybin-related business and adopting a ballot title and a statement.
I think
Or is
we
that the
actually
wrong
got to
one?
go back to the
Do we have to
public
go
here.
back?
So we're actually
Okay.
moving to conduct a second reading and adopt ordinance number 22-07.
What page is that on?
So if you go back
It's
to
on page
Scratch it.
37.
Page what?
Page 37.
37.
Oh, there it is. Okay, sorry, I apologize. Let's flip it and reverse it. Okay. I move to adopt ordinance number 2207, declaring a temporary ban on psilocybin businesses.
Okay, and actually to conduct a second reading as well. Right?
And to conduct a second reading as well.
Okay. Move and second to conduct a second reading and adopt ordinance number 22-07, declaring a temporary ban on psilocybin businesses. All those in favor signify with an aye.
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 All those opposed? Okay, and Commissioner Thompson votes in the affirmative. She did,
Okay,
in the affirmative. All right, so it's unanimous. And council, will you read the ordinance by title only?
An ordinance declaring a temporary ban on psilocybin businesses.
Thank you, County Council. So now we'll move on to the business agenda, which is the resolution and order referring to the voters of Clatsop County a measure proposing a temporary ban on psilocybin-related business and adopting a ballot title and explanatory statement. I knew I was gonna screw that. Okay, page 41. And we'll go ahead, and Joanna Lyons-Antley, our County Council, I'll turn it over to you.
Chair Quayla and members of the board, staff proposes a resolution in order to be referred to the voters of Clatsop County on the question of whether to establish a 2-year temporary ban on state licensed psilocybin product manufacturers and service centers within unincorporated Clatsop County. You will see attached to the resolution and order a proposed ballot title question. I say ballot title as in general, which is what goes to the voters, and see, now me too.
Oh, see, don't let it catch.
It's contagious.
Don't let it be contagious.
Explanatory statement. I will note, for the record, that the ballot title is something that it has to follow a certain formula. We have a certain amount of word count for the title itself, the question, and the summary. It also has to be it doesn't have any advocacy in there. It needs to be somewhat understandable and neutral. So we have a proposed statement here, as well as a proposed explanatory statement, also following many of those same rules. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, County Council. Any questions? Commissioner Webb.
My question is, was our Public Health Department involved at all in any of this decision-making about this issue?
The Public Health Department has not been involved in the ballot title issues and those discussions. They obviously, will be involved as we get into the time, place, and manner conversations, but not at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Toyoka.
Jumped ahead of myself with the last topic, but what I was getting at is the wording of the title and the room to give more unapproved or proven to treat these, but truth in lending states, that is we're going to use up and treat mental health. No disclaimers or no side effects, or it's not FDA approved. It's not. We don't have any of that in this. I think that's where the voters get kind of. They talk to me about it. They say, "Hey, I thought it was approving it for mental health and this, and I didn't realize it was going to open." What I'm getting at is we need some truth, or more, not truth, but facts in the state.
Chair Quayla and members of the board, I think as I'm thinking through the kind of the concerns and suggestions you have, I would suggest that in the ballot title itself, the question and the summary, there simply is not room to put that in there. But if your board chose to perhaps come back at a later date and adopt an explanatory statement, so not adopt explanatory statement tonight, and if your board chose to direct staff to perhaps put some of those facts in there, I think we would have room to perhaps change some of the language in that explanatory statement. I would, though, state, I believe County Clerk Tracy Kravenko is here, and I'm not sure what the time frame is for that, and if we would have the time to be able to do that. But I suggest that perhaps we might be able to do something like that in the explanatory statement.
County Clerk, would you like to come up to the to the table? County Clerk Tracy Kravenko.
Thank you. Yes, Tracy Kravenko, County Clerk. Thank you, Chair Quayla. There would be time, it would have to be, the explanatory statement does not go to be published. It only goes in the voter's pamphlet. So what needs to be published ahead of time before it can go to the voters is the ballot title itself. Explanatory statement, we have until like mid-September to accept that. I can't remember the exact date for sure off the top of my head, but we do have time to address that if need be. And there is definitely, I don't know how many word count, I didn't count the words yet on her proposal, but there's 500 words available for the explanatory statement.
Okay, thank you, County Clerk. Commissioner Banks and then Commissioner Webb.
So, as in regards to the explanatory statement, I like this one a lot. Because we can't reverse a law that has already been passed, or an ordinance or a rule that has already been passed by our voters, I don't know how much good it will do to dive down the route that Commissioner Toyoka is displaying, only mainly because that all of that information has to be vetted, researched, and I don't know or think that we have time, considering as much as I would like to have all of that information in everyone's hands. I feel like, and I hate saying it, that the horse has already left the barn, and we can't pull it back, I guess. The cat's already out of the bag, but I do like what I see here. If we have time to add some of my fellow commissioners' information in, I think that's great. But I think it all depends on, can we vet the information, and also, do we have time to do so? And on a note of a question, what I see presented here in Exhibit A, ballot title, is that the only thing that they're going to see when they're voting?
Commissioner Baines, members of the board, they will see the ballot title, which is, we call it a caption, the question, and then depending on how many measures we end up with total, or looking at ballot space, the summary may be on a separate paper, on in a pamphlet with all the other summaries, because we have, 4 state measures, and then other cities are putting stuff out, so we may consolidate that into one big flyer, save space on the ballot. Because in the voter's pamphlet, they'll see the whole picture of that, along with anybody's arguments that file for or against.
If they're anything like me, they'll lose the
Flyer.
yeah, sorry, I hate saying it.
I know.
So I'm just wondering if we can rephrase the question, not to sway, but to give a teeny bit more information of why we're asking for time.
Sure, Quayla and members of the board, as you could tell I was counting how many words. We have 20 words in the question, and we're at 18. So it is difficult to add more information within that word count. So I would suggest that that's probably pretty unlikely. Well, thank you.
Okay, the chair recognizes Commissioner Webb and then Commissioner Toffman. Commissioner Webb.
Thank you, Chair Quayla. I support very much what Commissioner Bangs has said about the fact that in Clatsop County, our voters have voted on this issue once before, and they have approved it. My other issue is that in Oregon, it seems to me that we are very strict about ballot titles and attendant information. And the idea, I thought this was wonderfully done. I really did. I did not make a single mark on Exhibit A of any of the words. I wouldn't change anything. I thought it was just really, really well done. And often, what is the process? Does anybody at the state level take a look and have to approve what we put on a ballot? Because to me, the idea of persuasive information is not appropriate in this.
Chair Quayla and members of the board, what happens after the ballot title is approved and forwarded? Is
By whom?
you as the board would be referring it to the voters, so you would be approving the ballot title as it is written.
Okay.
It would then be published in the newspaper and given, anybody who wants to object to the form of the ballot title would be given a certain shortened period of time to object and take it to circuit court. In fact, we're going through that process now with a short-term rental referendum. So there is a process. It does go through circuit court. If there is no objections, then this would be the ballot title as printed.
But nobody at the state level has to approve it.
No, Commissioner, they do not. I am the one to approve it at the county level, and mainly what I look at is with Joanna, the constitutional ratifications of it, if it meets our constitution, if it contradicts anything that is not considered constitutional, or it tries to make changes that are not really available. This makes changes that are available to us, and I also check for word count. The only one that can override the word count would be a judge,
Okay,
which I just learned myself.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, it's interesting to, we're not talking about rhetoric on the issue of the environment. We're talking about rhetoric on drug use. And so I would urge us to consider data and not just recent data, because there's long-term data going back 40 or more years on psilocybin. So I am not persuaded that it's a harmful substance. And if I am understanding Commissioner Toyoka, in his mind it is. Nevertheless, our job is to be neutral. Our job is to look at data. And before I go, I want to say go into a conflict with my colleagues, I'd like to urge us to step back and consider that we can trust our voters to make the right decision and not try and sway them by information that we put in that we don't internally agree on, because I don't think we're going to come to agreement on this. So I'd rather have us step back and look for what is fair and neutral and scientific data. So that's my request to my colleagues. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson. Commissioner Toyoka?
Thank you. I guess, I'm not trying to buck the will of the voter. People approach me and I get the letters and the correspondence about, like on 110, there's a lot of buyer's remorse on that because of, there's a lot of unintended consequences that came out of 110, and it was because of the wording of the ballot that made it seem innocuous. And I think that's genesis of this on, 109 is, I think there's a lot of unintended consequences of 109. And just don't want us to see us go down that same rabbit hole because of, the way the ballots are written, the way, there's going to be a lot of unintended consequences. At least I think people have the right to know that knowledge of what we're actually looking at instead of finding it out after it's adopted, like we did with 110. That's all.
Thank you, Commissioner Toyoka. Commissioner Banks?
I don't.
I see County Council also. Did you want to respond to Commissioner Toyoka? Okay. Commissioner Banks?
I definitely don't disagree with the amount of unintended consequences of Measure 110, or the unintended consequences that I can foresee with this one. I just feel like we can't stop the tide. It's already here. And so what we have to do is deal with the consequences of it, and asking our voters for more time will help us hopefully manage time, place, and manner. And hopefully within time, place, and manner, we will be able to manage or alleviate some potential unintended consequences. do we need a motion that accepts Exhibit A, or what are we asking to accomplish this evening?
County Council?
Chair Quayle and members of the board, as part of your proposed motion, it would include acceptance of the proposed Exhibit A, which would include the ballot title and explanatory statement. Members of the board, if I might add as well, the county clerk and I were chatting a little bit, and she pointed out that commissioners, in fact, have their own personal statements. You can prepare your own arguments if you go through the proper channels. And I'm not 100% sure what those might be, but there are options out there for expressing your own personal statements as elected officials. Yeah.
Commissioner Toyoka?
Yeah. And when I was elected, I vowed to represent. So I just, I hear a lot of these things, so I'm trying to represent that elected me. And then the other part is, I was a Marine, so you don't fight the battles you can win, you fight the fight that needs to be fought. And so a role of representative, that's why I'm bringing this.
And thank you, Commissioner Toyoka. I appreciate your conviction on this and your position. I have to agree that I think this needs to be a neutral statement and one that's legally sound, and I believe that what is presented in front of us is. So, do we have a motion?
I can move to adopt resolution and order referring to the voters of Clatsop County a measure proposing a temporary ban on psilocybin-related business and adopting a ballot title and explanatory statement. That is, I think
It's already
it's already there. It's already included.
B.
Thank you, Commissioner Thompson, for letting me reword that so I could get explanatory statement right this time.
Do we have a second?
Yes, second. Thank you.
Okay, move and second to adopt resolution and order referring to the voters of Clatsop County a measure proposing a temporary ban on psilocybin-related business and adopting a ballot title and explanatory statement. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. Oh, are you abstaining? Commissioner Toyoka, okay. Okay. Do we need a roll call vote then? Or just, it's the abstentions noted, okay. We'll go ahead and thank you very much, County Clerk and County Council. Appreciate that. We'll go ahead and go to the good of the order. Does anybody have any items for the good of the order this evening?
Something that I forgot.
You're too young for that.
All right. We don't have anything else on our agenda, so we'll go ahead and adjourn. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Have an executive session this evening?
No.